Hello and welcome to the France 24 debate. If you're just joining us, I'm Annette Young, filling in for Francois Picard. And the battle between Poland and Europe continues today, with the European Commission saying it's keeping the door open to possibly triggering sanctions against Poland. This despite the Polish president's rejection of parts of a legal overhaul that limits the independence of the courts. Brussels says by the Polish president still signing off on another bill to give the Justice Minister power to remove all the heads of lower courts in the country, that itself still significantly increases the threat to the rule of law. It's also given Warsaw 1 month to respond. Now, in return, Poland has described Europe's response as being nothing more than sheer blackmail. Clément Bonheur has more.
An unprecedented warning to an EU member as the standoff between Poland and the European Commission continues. The bloc has threatened to impose sanctions on Warsaw if the government presses ahead with controversial reforms of the country's judiciary.
The Commission's recommendation asks the Polish authorities not to take any measure to dismiss or force the retirement of Supreme Court judges. If such a measure is taken, the Commission is ready to immediately trigger the Article 7(1) procedure.
Legal action by the EU could include suspending Poland's voting rights in the bloc. The warning comes despite moves by Polish President Andrzej Duda to veto 2 of his government's reform bills earlier this week. Duda did, however, approve a 3rd law, which gives the Justice Minister the right to name the heads of Poland's lower courts. The bill has yet to be formally enacted, but Poland's government insisted it would not bow to EU pressure.
We will not accept any blackmail from the EU in the context of the proposed reforms in Poland. These reforms are perfectly compatible with the Polish constitution and are compliant with Polish laws, as well as with the principles of Polish government.
The government's controversial reform plans have triggered mass demonstrations in Poland, with hundreds of thousands of people taking to the streets across the country.
Now, before we begin our discussion, let's get more from our correspondent Gulliver Cragg, who's been covering those protests in Warsaw. Gulliver, what has the Polish government's reaction after the European Commission's announcement been, given what they said earlier today?
Well, as you saw in the report, the government spokesman said we won't accept any blackmail from Poland. Everyone in the Polish government seems to be singing from the same hymn sheet. They are very, very angry, and they don't seem to want to consider the idea that the European Commission has legitimate concerns or even any legitimacy to be commenting on this at all. I spoke to the Polish foreign minister this morning, and he said he thinks all of this fuss about the rule of law is just a pretext because most of the European Union's governments do not like this nationalist conservative Polish government and they want to get rid of it. They want it ousted, and so they are absolutely in a position of defiance. I've just been watching Polish state television, and it is all about why is the European Union intervening in areas in which it has no competence. There doesn't seem to be any discussion at all about the idea that Polish courts have to apply European law, that there are certain rights and certain procedures which have been universalised in the European Union, and that according to the European Union's treaties, the European Union absolutely does have a business to ensure that certain rules are respected. None of that is being discussed on Polish state TV, and no one in the Polish government seems to be prepared to admit that at all.
So what have the Polish people been saying in general? I mean, how much support does the government actually have for all this?
Well, the Polish people are very divided on this question. I think most Polish people agree that the Polish judicial system is in urgent need of reform, and that the previous government, which served 2 terms, is very much at fault for having done nothing to right a system which sees court cases drag on for years and years, and there have been numerous scandalous cases of bad results being, bad verdicts being handed out by judges that have then afterwards been overturned. There are a lot of people who are very angry. I've spoken to some of them on the phone, actually. They're constantly shown on Polish state TV, these people who feel that they've been victims of corrupt judges and so on. on. So there's a majority to say that the court system needs reform, and some people think that exactly the reform that was being proposed by this government was what was needed, and feel very angry that the Polish president opposed his veto to 2 of these bills, and now that the European Commission seems to be trying to block it. But I think they are a minority, perhaps a large minority, but I think the majority of Polish people realise that although reform of the judicial system is needed, this reform that was proposed by this government was very much a power grab and something that is in the line with a number of other sort of authoritarian moves that this government has made that have got, I think, a slim majority of Polish people pretty worried that this government is heading in a dangerously authoritarian direction.
Gulliver Gragg reporting there from Warsaw. Thank you so much. And now here to discuss the standoff between Warsaw and Brussels with me, Jan Zielonka, a professor of European politics at Oxford University and also author of Is the EU Doomed? From Warsaw, Dominik Zarzyński, the MP for the ruling Law and Justice Party, which has been primarily responsible for driving these reforms. Also from Warsaw, David Cadier, a researcher with the London School of Economics Ideas think tank. And finally from Brussels, we have Dominika Kozic, a Polish journalist. Thanks to all 4 of you for being with me. Jan, let me start with you. Where does this EU warning now leave Poland?
Well, Poland has to respond and somehow have to find a way to deal with the European Union. I suppose at the end of the day, things will be decided in Poland. Basically, it depends whether the public pressure will simply make the government change opinion. And it very much depends whether the other branch of the government, which is the president, will go along with what looks to me is a policy of breaking judicial independence.
Dominik, let me talk to you. Any move from your ruling Law and Justice Party, or PIS as it's commonly referred to in English, to force the resignation of the country's judges is going to see the EU stand immediately, quote, ready to trigger Article 7 procedure, which basically means sanctions. Strong words. Do you think that, when you hear those words, what is your response? Does it make you that much more determined to follow through with your programme of reform?
I'm very happy that you mentioned our program. This is what we promised to our people. This is what we promised during our campaign. This is nothing new. And you have to remember that our party, the Law and Justice, is the first party in the newest history of Poland which was elected without need of coalition. A huge support of Polish people who elected us expecting these reforms. I have to repeat, this is what we promised. The level of corruption in Polish courts are absolutely amazing, absolutely unacceptable. We cannot really say we lied, we're not going to put these reforms in move. We promised and we're going to keep our word.
David Cadier, I just want to talk to you. Invocation of Article 7 of the EU's treaties would be an unprecedented move that has yet to be taken against a member state government.
Yes, it's actually a new article, and it's also a very massive measure, if I may say. It's commonly referred to as the nuclear option within the Lisbon Treaty. Nuclear because it's one of last resort, and one because it's actually potentially very destructive, and not just for the state concerned, also for the EU Commission. So I think the EU must act, is right to act, but should really tread carefully and in how it steps in this complex national situation that has been described. But I should also mention that this Article 7 is a very long process. So it's really not something that happens overnight, even when it's invoked. And as you explained, the EU Commission has not invoked it yet.
Dominik Kozic.
But everyone knows that it's impossible to implement Article 7. You need 100% votes. You need all EU member states to vote against Poland. Hungary, Austria and others, they already mentioned we're not going to support this EU proposition. So it's only, threatening without really ammo if we are talking about the guns and bombs. So everybody knows that it is impossible. EU needs to change. EU needs reforms as well. There is no need for the conflicts. There are so many more important topics to be discussed within EU, like terrorism and illegal immigration, that our reforms, which are very, very legal. I'd like to read out just one sentence from our constitution, one sentence which is very short. In case of change of the structure of the courts, of the districts, a judge might be transferred to another court or retired from the service, provided their full remunerations is retired, which is retained, which is Article 180.5, which means that our reforms are accord to the Constitution.
Dominic, at this point, let me bring in Dominika Kozic from Brussels. Now, this bill has yet to be formally enacted, meaning the Commission can't start proceedings to challenge it in court. But Brussels apparently can, as they say, pre-authorise a challenge in the event. Is that right from your understanding?
Yes, I think that at this moment the European Commission realizes also that it's also not only Polish government but also European Commission in very difficult situation. I will make follow-up to the sentence which Dominic just told, that on the very end of this procedure of this Article 7, it is common voting in the Council and there are members' countries who are voting, and it will be enough veto of one country, for example Hungary, and Prime Minister Viktor Orban many times repeated that Hungary will never vote against Poland to stop this procedure, which means that the European Commission knows very well that on the very end they will have failure, and it will be failure of European Commission, not Poland. And it is another case also I would like to add, because a few days ago in Poland it was big rumor, especially around politicians from opposition parties who told that in the Brussels they are considering new option that they will combine in the one package voting against Poland and against Hungary, which it means that Poland would be not able to vote against sanction on Hungary, and Hungary the same will be not able to vote against sanction on Poland. Today I was asking about this, I was asking for comment of Commissioner Timmermans, and he told very openly that it is absolutely impossible from a legal point of view, because the European Commission is considering every single country individually. So it will be one voting on Poland, one voting on Hungary, and it means that on the very end it will be, I think, the failure of European Commission, which will be not very good signal for the rest of European Union and also institution, because European Commission will present that is just weak and it is incapable to do something important against some member countries.
Dominika, I want to just ask Jan this. We've heard there from our correspondent a few minutes ago saying that there are a number of people in Poland who just see this as nothing more than a grab for power by the ruling party. What is your opinion of what's going on?
Well, Constitution is very clear. It guarantees independence of the judicial system, and it also guarantees the division of power between different branches of government, the judiciary, the parliamentary and the executive. It's those laws are in open conflict with this, and we can always argue one way or another, but at the end of the day it's very difficult to say that this is not the case. And,
are you worried about Poland's democratic future?
And the problem is that it's true that the governing party has won the election. Nobody questioned this, but they don't have constitutional majority to change this constitution.
We're not changing constitution. We're not changing constitution. We are changing the law of the courts.
But implications is that the independence of judiciary is being very much constrained, and this is the reason.
It's not true. It is not true. Our law is much more liberal than the law in Germany. Look at Germany. In Poland, we're gonna.
But Dominic,
Poland,
if your law was indeed doing what it was supposed to do, you would not have Brussels threatening you with sanctions.
And you wouldn't have a president.
Please,
you wouldn't
this
have the president veto 2 of those laws.
Veto from the president means that our constitution and our democracy is very well. We are doing very well. That's his constitutional right, and he used that. It means that he's not the president of law and justice, but he's the president of all Poles. For 2 years, he's been told, and he was called a pen. He was called really bad names, as a president of law and justice, which is not true. He used his constitutional right. Now he's going to propose his offer. We're going to see what this offer is, and then we're going to discuss it. Very important is that in Poland, not Minister of Justice will appoint judges, which is not true. We heard that. Look at Germany. In Germany, a Minister of Justice directly taking the point and taking the judges. And in Poland, we're going to have National Council of Judges between government and the courts. That's the difference. So our law is even more European, more civilized.
Dominic, at this point, let me allow Jan to respond.
Look, I understand that you have to defend government policy. The problem is that
I'm defending Polish people who elected us.
The very few people agree with what you argue. And the very fact that you won elections, it doesn't mean that you are in a position to curb judicial independence. And you know very well that you would have to compromise on this. And of course, there are various solutions of appointing judges, but there are certain constitutional principles for which you don't have a mandate to infringe.
In what way we are limiting independence of the judges?
But look, it's very simple. If a general procureur, who is a minister of justice, has decisive role in appointing judges, which are part of the same judicial process, then you don't need to be a lawyer to understand that basically...
I'm a lawyer.
I'm a lawyer too, but that's not the point.
There you go.
At this point, we're going to have...
That is the point, because I'd like to have essential discussion. I don't want to have a political criticism, which we are having from EU since we won the election. They are looking for any really example to criticize us. I'd like to have essential discussion about Article 180 of Polish Constitution, point 5. Every judge can be retired.
At this point, I'm afraid we are unfortunately constrained by the fact we need to have a break. We are coming back for the second part of the France 24 debate. Hello and welcome back to the second part of the France 24 debate. I'm Annette Young, filling in for Francois Picard. And the battle between Poland and Europe continues, with the European Commission this Wednesday stepping up pressure by giving Warsaw just 1 month to reinstate what they say is judicial independence before possibly triggering sanctions against Warsaw. This despite the Polish president's rejection of parts of a legal overhaul that limits the independence of courts. Brussels says by the Polish president still signing off on a bill to give the Justice Minister power to name all heads of the lower courts in the country, that itself still significantly increases the threat to the rule of law. In response, Poland has described Europe's response as being nothing more than blackmail. Here to discuss this with me is Jan Zielonka, a professor of European politics at Oxford University and author of Is the EU Doomed? From Warsaw, Dominik Zarzinski, the MP for the ruling Law and Justice Party. Also from Warsaw, David Carrier, a researcher with the London School of Economics Ideas think tank. And finally from Brussels, Dominika Kozic, a Polish journalist. David Carrier, I want to start with you. This issue, as we've just seen there in the last few minutes before we went to a break, has increasingly polarised a country that's witnessed massive protests in recent weeks. Those protests don't seem likely to disappear given today's events.
Well, this is difficult to predict, but I think Jan Zielonka at the beginning said that ultimately this issue will be solved inside Poland, and the veto by the president is certainly a recent development in that sense. We don't know where the protest will go, whether they will grow, whether they will diminish. It's not the end of the story. That's what we can hear here in Warsaw. And the question is what the EU can do in this politicized, in this polarized environment. I heard that the EU is doing a political action. I beg to differ. The EU is simply applying treaties, and the Article 2 of the Lisbon Treaty mentions rule of law as one of the founding values of the EU. I also heard that if the EU Commission's act, it will be a disaster for it. I actually think that if the EU Commission doesn't act, it will be a problem, because the EU is a community of value. And the proof of that is that when another country wants to join the EU, the first thing that is asked is that this country respects the so-called Copenhagen criteria, which are the founding values of the EU, and respect of the rule of law is one of them. And finally, on the Article 7, again, I heard that this cannot be activated. I think we need to differentiate two things. For the EU Commission to suggest to activate a probe, the process of the Article 7, a qualified majority of member states is enough. And I think this qualified majority of member states can be found. Where you need unanimity is when the Council decides that there has been a serious breach and that you impose sanctions. Sanctions either in terms of suspending voting rights or suspending EU funds. I certainly hope we won't come to that, and that the laws will be amended before. It was mentioned that yes, one country, Hungary, has already said that it would veto such sanctions. So indeed, in the end, it might come down to member states' politics. But even if the process is activated and Hungary veto the process, it will nonetheless send a strong signal to EU member states that the EU Commission takes EU values seriously. A signal also to the Polish population. Some of them are undecided. They're not all in the street or all supporting the law and justice government. Some are just waiting and are actually attached to the image of their country, to the European standing of Poland. And so if the process is started, even if there's no sanctions, it would actually already be a problem. And finally, Hungary, yes, announced that it would veto, but let's remember that Hungary is also facing a rule of law probe.
Let me ask Dominik Kozic.
Yes, and that's why, if I can add...
Go ahead, Dominik.
I cannot, I'm so sorry to interrupt. Yes, Hungary will face a very similar situation, and it is reason for which this time Hungary will be loyal towards Polish government, because they will be afraid that first will be voting on Poland and second will be voting on Hungary. So they are afraid that they will be treated the same way like is Poland treated. So that's why this time I think that they will be very loyal towards Polish government. And I would like also to say something, another things I would like to add, that it is, we are considering this from Polish point of view, that it is a case of Poland, but it is also game of power between a European institution. It is game between the European Commission from one side and the European Council from the other side, because it is not a new thing, it is nothing new, that the European Commission would like to gain more power for themselves. That's why they are using every single opportunity to raise his power. And it is this case. And on the very beginning of rule of law procedure, it was lots of comments, lots of voices, even from Brussels, from institutions, that this rule of law procedure, which is using against Poland, is not fully legally from a legal point of view, because it was created 3 years ago. And then the European Commission had in mind Hungary, not in Poland, because it was a case of Hungary. And some lawyers from European Council told that this mechanism is not legally.
Let me talk
But there is more very important thing I'd like to add, just one sentence.
Okay,
it
Dominic.
Seems like we are not having essential discussion. I'd like to speak about the paragraphs of this act, of this bill, rather about the political situation. We have a saying in Poland that I don't have to prove that I'm not a camel. It seems like we have this kind of case. We have to prove that we are not the camels. No, if you are saying, I'm saying about EU, that there is something in contradiction with European values, these beautiful words, European law, prove it. You see, Mr. Timmermans, he never asked about opinion of Venice Commission. He went out today and he says, okay, this is against European values. No proofs, no examples, no paragraphs discussed. He doesn't even know this act. He doesn't know this bill. And I would not say that people who are on the streets are in majority. This is minority. And you have to remember 8 out of 10 people are supporting us with these reforms. And ironically, Mr. Timmermans, coming from the country where constitutional court doesn't exist, and he's trying to tell us about the rule of law and the countries about European values. Look at Germany. In Germany, Minister of Justice appointing directly judges. In Poland, not minister. It is not true. We heard that, but it's not true. In Poland, we have Minister of Justice, National Council of Judges, and they are appointing the judges. In Germany, they don't have National Council of Judges. They don't have it in Sweden, in Denmark, even in Japan or Australia. So if we are discussing some kind of sanctions, we are discussing about ghosts. I'd like to have essential discussion with proofs, with discussion on paragraphs. And again, just finishing, Article 180.5 of Polish constitution.
Dominic.
Judges can be retired. That's it.
Dominic, let me just get response to what you just said from Jan here in the studio.
You see, you are talking to the international audience. You are not talking to your staunch party supporters.
That's why I'm using facts.
So if you want to stick to facts, you said at the beginning, Polish judges are corrupted. Well, if you think any Polish judge is corrupted, you should bring them to justice and not conduct here on the television accusations without any proof.
You see?
And you don't bring...
You see the difference? Sorry. The difference between us...
Dominic, let Jan finish.
And you see... and you don't bring corrupted judge to justice, but by dismissing all judges of Supreme Court at once with no particular proof of any wrongdoing of any of them.
And at this point, let me bring in David Kadier.
I'd like to answer that.
David Kadier, I want to ask you, the thing is that the president in Poland is supposed to be a neutral party in all of this, but he's already a member of the ruling populist party and he's refused a meeting with Donald Tusk over this matter. How independent is he really?
Well, I think it's his powers are defined by the Polish constitutions, as was mentioned. How is he? How independent is he? It's difficult to know what's happening behind closed doors. What we know is that he demonstrated some independence by vetoing the 2 bills that are incriminated.
But I mean, let me ask you, Jan. Just how neutral a party is the president? I mean, we have seen him there veto 2 of the 3 bills, which certainly was a surprise move, and certainly among the members of the Law and Justice Party. But for you, is he truly an independent, neutral party in all of this?
In politics, nobody is truly independent, but he is supposed to be a guardian of constitution, and he thought that those 2 laws are not in accordance with the constitution, and has made, in political terms, something very courageous, and contradicted his own former party, because formally he is not a member of the party. And the next months will show how independent he is, but politics is not all or nothing. There will be a lot of arm twisting and bargaining behind the scenes.
Dominic, and also I want to ask you, are you disappointed by the fact that the president used his veto?
I'm going to answer that in a minute, but Annette, I have a big favor. If you were doing a big favor, don't call us a populist party. Don't call us a nationalist, which we heard in the beginning. We are not populists, we are not nationalists, we are proud European, we are proud Polish people. According to your question, we are a bit surprised, but as I said in the beginning, that's a constitutional right and constitutional law which was used by Polish president. According to the question of Jan, you're talking about lack of proofs for corruption. You see, we have tapes which whole Poland heard, leaked. We have tapes with the discussion and talks from Supreme Court judges, and we have a proof. But the difference between three powers in Poland is that me, as a member of the parliament, can be put on trial, I can lose my mandate in the parliament, and judges, they're not. They are above the law. There is no way to hunt them. And this is one of the reasons why we're trying to put these reforms, because there's no equal powers in Poland. Two powers are responsible, they can be put on trial. Judges are absolutely above the law. So I'm very happy you mentioned that. We have the proofs, we have drunk driving judges, we have judges who steal things from the shops, like a lifter. We have many examples, and you could see that on the media. This is not hidden information, not hidden knowledge. Everyone in Poland see that.
Dominika Kozic in Brussels. The Polish parliament, I understand, could in fact challenge the president's veto. Is that likely to happen?
It's very hard to say to answer it for me, because I am looking for this situation from distance from Brussels. We'll see. For me, something which is a little bit dangerous is this short term which the European Commission today gave to Poland. It's 1 month to react, but in the same time, everybody knows that now in Poland we have holiday. Even Polish parliament doesn't work anymore, and because of the holidays break. So I don't know what European Commission expect, that who will react and at which way in situation that in which everybody are on holiday. We'll see what will happen in the parliament, because it is not only law and justice who is willing to have some changes in our and some reform in judicial system, but also another party from opposition like Cookies 15. It is a new movement. It is a more movement than a party, which are also very strongly supporting some changes and reform inside the Polish judicial system. They would like to change this law. They say that in Poland law is not enough efficient and it's not enough helping to citizens. So I think that in this case, law and justice will have support of Cookies 15, with the rest of the parties like Platform Civic, Nowoczesna, and Polish and PSL. It will be difficult to expect that they will support initiative of president, but we'll see, because also it depends on president now what he will present, which kind of proposal he would like to offer, and how far it will be away from this proposal of European Commission.
Jan, I mean, we've been hearing there from Dominic in Warsaw. We've also heard in our report and also from our correspondent that there clearly is a need for judicial reform. But in your opinion, what would have been the best way to have pursued that?
Well, there is always need for reform, and including judiciary, but not a reform conducted in this way, where basically the balance of power between various branches of government is being broken, and where judicial independence becomes fiction. If, for instance, this is not the only country where courts take too much time to adjudicate. I happen to work in Italy for many years, so I know something about the slow judicial system. But nobody in Italy would try basically a reform of that sort. So yes, we need to change the system and improve it as we go along, but these laws were clearly unconstitutional. They were found non-constitutional by various independent bodies, and in Poland and outside. And I think law and justice would have to reconcile with this fact and abolish those laws and try to reform judiciary in a different way. And this is only the questions of time that they realize it. I understand that politicians never said, well, I've made mistake and it's difficult to pedal back. But in that case, I don't think they have any other option.
David Cartier, given your experience and expertise about the EU, is Europe handling this in the best fashion?
Well, this is a very tricky situation for Europe because on one hand, as I mentioned earlier, it cannot simply stand by. Also because Poland is a very important country for the EU. It was a success story for so many years, and it's coming down to basic, as I said, principles enshrined in EU treaties. So the EU, in a way, feels forced to react. But at the same time, the EU Commission must tread very carefully because it's a polarized political situation, as we heard. And the Commission should actually not give the impression that it's actually overstepping.
Clearly, we're sorry, David. We seem to be having technical problems. Let me talk to Dominic in Warsaw. I mean, we're talking there about the image. We're talking there, as David Cartier just said, that Poland was seen for a long time as a shining example of what is possible in terms of reform. Do you understand why the EU is concerned?
Well, basically because they cannot kiss us in our forehead like Mr. Juncker used to kiss Donald Tusk. They cannot clap us on the shoulder and say, you're good. They cannot really do the Nord Stream 2 with Russia without our comments. They cannot make businesses as they used to do. Now in Poland, we have the lowest unemployment in history within 26 years. We have a growth which was never seen in the newest history of Poland. That's official data. So it's all about politics. It's all about doing the business in Poland, being drilled in a way. Poland was just a land of business for many European influences, politicians as well. And it's not the way we want to have a Poland. We want to have a strong, proud Poland. These are not empty words. We want to be a partners. We are very open for the discussion. We want to be within the European Union. We don't want to leave the European Union. We are not populists, nationalists, but we don't want to be treated like small children. And we want to be a partner, and we want to be listened. No one really spoke to us. No one really asked us about anything. Mr. Timmermans didn't ask the Venice Commission. He just go out and gave his opinions, political opinions. As I said, he never mentioned any paragraph. And he's not even elected. And he's trying to tell me about the rule of law. More respect. And think about it. We want to be the part of this family, but respect us.
When you hear what Dominic has to say, I mean... I would like to add... OK, Dominica, just very quickly, because we're coming to the end of the show.
Yes, very quickly. I would like to underline something also important, but not very political. It is a question of mentality of some nation. Polish people doesn't want to have someone from outside to interfere to internal Polish cases. So in this case, even if some Polish people doesn't agree with politics of government, they would be against pressure of the European Commission because they don't want someone from distance to take part in Polish internal affairs. So the pressure of European Commission is inefficient in Poland because Polish people in this case will mostly support government because, as I thought, it is a question of mentality. And I think that the European Commission and other institutions should also know about this and should also respect this fact because they will maybe change some kind of modus operandi.
I'm afraid we've run out of time. I want to thank all of my guests and apologies to David Cartier for those technical problems. And it's time now for Media Watch. And Emma James has been taking a look at the stories dominating social media. Hello, Emma.
Hello.
Not surprisingly, Donald Trump's latest policy tweet is causing an outcry.
Yes, absolutely. Once again, it seems like there's some sort of daily outrage coming out of the United States. Again, it came from Donald Trump's Twitter account. This time, he announced that he was going to ban transgender people from serving in the military. The New York Times among those reporting on it. And what should be added to this headline, Trump says that transgender people will not be allowed in the military, is that is in no capacity whatsoever. It's not a question of serving on the front lines, or as far as he is concerned, they have no place in the military whatsoever. What he cited in his tweets was the tremendous medical costs and disruption that transgender in the military would entail. However, according to studies carried out by the RAND Corporation, which isn't exactly liberal, it's quite conservative, they said that costs would be minimal because it's only a very small minority of transgender recruits who would actually need any substantial care or help of any kind. Well, as for the question of why now, well, it's not... I mean, the method of delivery does make you think it's come out of the blue because it looks like a random tweet that's come out of nowhere. But it is something that has been being discussed on Capitol Hill, whether the Pentagon should pay for things like transition surgery or hormone therapy. The outrage, of course, has come from across the board, but without question, obviously, from the lesbian, gay, bisexual and transgender community. The LGBT caucus says it spits in the face of brave transgender soldiers already serving openly and defending their country. Now, nobody knows exactly what the figure is for transgender people serving in the US military. Estimates range from 1,320, that's the lowest figure, right up to 15,500, and certainly a lot of people seem to be talking about 15,000 as the figure, so perhaps that is the most accurate figure. Vote Vets, which obviously supports people who have previously served in the military, point out that the Secretary of Defence is currently on vacation, James Mad Dog Mattis as he is known, and according to them, the Pentagon wasn't ready for this. Now, they clearly think that Donald Trump was acting, going rogue, if you like, going off on one while his Secretary of Defence was away. However, according to a Washington Post journalist, Philip Rucker, he says that a White House official has spoken to him saying that Secretary Mattis was consulted on the trans military ban, and Trump's announcement should not have surprised him. So it will be interesting to see what happens when Mattis returns to work, obviously. The previous Defence Secretary, who is the one who actually enabled transgender people to be in the military in the first place, because it's worth remembering this is only something that happened about a year ago during the Obama administration.
Yes. And of course also the policy about being gay in the military as well.
Absolutely, and all these changes are very recent things. They've been hard-fought, hard-won victories, and I think that's why people are so upset with what's happened today with so little warning. Ash Carter, who was the Defence Secretary then, has released a statement, and he says that that already there are many transgender individuals serving capably and honourably. Quality people in uniform are what make our military the finest fighting force the world has ever seen, he said. He's very upset. Many, many politicians are on both sides of the divide. Joe Biden, obviously a Democrat, saying every patriotic American who is qualified to serve in our military should be able to serve, full stop. Ana Navarro, a Republican who's very critical of Donald Trump, says she is grateful to Americans, including LGBT, willing to sacrifice and risk their life in military service more than draft dodger Trump ever did. And also it's worth noting that John McCain, he himself, of course, a veteran, having served in Vietnam, he said there is no reason to force service members who are able to fight to leave the military, regardless of their gender identity. Now, of course, the fact that Donald Trump didn't serve in the military is something that a lot of people are bringing up today, saying how can a draft dodger tell other people that they are not fit to serve in the military? Lots of people sharing this article from just over a year ago in the New York Times, and they give the reasons for all those draft dodges, 5 of them in total. 1 of them was for heel spurs. If you're wondering, the gentleman in the middle there is Donald Trump, taken in 1964. This is a picture of him as a high school senior at the New York Military Academy. Now, the other thing that a lot of people are pointing out is the immense hypocrisy and U-turns that he's done on this issue. This is a tweet from June last year where he said, "Thank you to the LGBT community. I will fight for you while Hillary brings in more people that will threaten your freedoms and beliefs." The Daily Show pointing out that clearly he has forgotten that the T means transgender.
Thanks for that, Emma James. A controversial move indeed. And that's it for this edition. Do stay with us here on France 24 as there's more news and headlines coming up very shortly.